To his friend Arrianus, you are usually delighted at any event in the Senate worthy of that order, following your preference for a peaceful life. You have retired from Rome, concern for the dignity of the state is lodged in your mind. So let me tell you of the event of recent days, which the celebrity of the gentle figure made notorious, which the stern precedent is, which the stern precedent it set made salutary, and which the importance of the case made of perennial significance. Marius Priscus was indicated by the Africans, whom he governed as proconsul. He pleaded guilty and asked for assessors to be appointed. Cornelius and I, who had been bidden to represent the provincials, believed that it was in keeping with the trust reposed in us to inform the Senate that Priscus, by his monstrous savagery, had overstepped any charge for which assessors could be appointed, for he had received money for their condemnation and even the execution of innocent persons. Catius Fronto, in reply, pleaded that no investigation should be made beyond the law covering extortion. He is a man with the greatest expertise at extracting tears, and he filled all the sails of his speech with the breeze, as it were, of compassion. There was considerable dispute with considerable shouting on both sides, some maintaining that the Senate's judicial inquiry was limited by legal principle, and others claiming that its discretion was free and unfettered, and that the punishment should be measured by the guilt of the defendant. In the end, Julius Verus, the consul de Senate, who is a man of uprightness and probity, proposed that in the meantime assessors should not be appointed for Marius, but that the persons to whom he was alleged to have sought the punishment of innocent men should be summoned. This proposal was not merely carried, but after those major disagreements, it was absolutely the only one which won support. Such outcomes demonstrate that benevolence and pity exercise an initial impact, which is penetrating and considerable, but they gradually matured thought and reason stifle them and cause them to subside. The result is that a position maintained by many in mingled shouting finds no one willing to defend it when the rest are silent, the reason being that assessment of factors clogged by turmoil becomes clear once you detach it from that turmoil.
The men who had been summoned to attend, Vitellius Honoratus and Flavius Marcianus, did arrive. One of them, Honoratus, was accused of having procured the sight of a Roman knight in the execution of 7 of his friends for 300,000 sesterces, and the other, Marcianus, of having purchased for 700,000 sesterces the multiple punishments of the Roman knight. For the victim had been beaten with clubs, condemned to the mines, and strangled in prison. Honoratus, however, was withdrawn for the Senate's judgment by a time death. Marcianus was led into the Senate, while Priscus stayed away. This was why the ex-consul Tucius Cerealis used his right as a senator to demand that Priscus be informed. The reason was that he thought that if Priscus appeared in person, he would attract greater pity or greater odium, or alternatively, this is my preferred opinion. It was because it was the fairest procedure that the joint accusation should be defended by both, and that if they could not be acquitted, both should be punished. The case was adjourned until the Senate next met. It was a most majestic scene. The emperor as consul presided, and in addition the month of January brings to Rome both the public and senators in great numbers. Moreover, the importance of the case, the anticipation and gossip which had swelled in with its postponement, and the inherent interest of people in acquainting themselves with important and unusual events had aroused the whole population from all quarters. Picture my anxiety and apprehension at having to speak in the gathering on such an important issue and in the presence of the emperor. True, I have performed a number of times in the Senate, and indeed there is nowhere I am usually listened to with greater favor. But on that occasion the entire scene seemed unprecedented and affected me with unprecedented apprehension. Apart from the factors I have mentioned, the difficulty of the case confronted me in the dock was one who only recently had been a consular and only recently a septemvir in charge of his, but now was neither. So it was considerable burden to accuse a man already condemned, a man who thought under the weight of a monstrous accusation was fortified by the pity felt for a condemnation already decided. Somehow or other I composed my mind, gathered my thoughts, and began to speak. My anxiety was counterbalanced by the approval of my listeners. I spoke for almost 5 hours, for 4 further water clocks were added to the 12 of the largest size already alluded to me. Thus, the very factors which had seemed forbidden and hostile before I spoke turned out to be my to be my to be to, I spoke turned out to be to my advantage on once I began. Kaiser in fact showed me such great support and also such great concern, it would be an exaggeration to call it anxiety, that he more than once counseled me, Friedman, who stood behind me, that I should not strain my voice and lungs, for he thought that I was extending myself more vigorously than my slender physique could stand. Claudius Marcellinus spoke in response to me on behalf of Marcianus. The Senate was then dismissed and ordered to reconvene the next day, for by that time a speech could not be begun without its being cut short by the arrival of darkness. Next day, Xavius Liberalis spoke on behalf of Marius. He is a clever, well-organized, sharp, and eloquent speaker, and in this case he brought forth all his skills. Cornelius Tacitus spoke most eloquently in reply, with the majesty which is the outstanding feature of his eloquence. Curtius Fronto delivered a second speech on behalf of Marius. It was a notable performance, and, as the occasion now demanded, he devoted more time to pleas for clemency than to a defense. Then the evening closed in on his speech, but without forcing him to cut it short. Accordingly, the summing up extended to a third day. This was a fine old practice, by which the Senate was adjourned at nightfall, summoned on 3 days, and confined to 3 days. Cornutus Tertullus, the consul de Senate, and an outstanding man who stands foursquare for the truth, proposed that the 700,000 stages which Marius had received should be deposited in the treasury, that Marius should be debarred from Rome and Italy, and Marcianus from this and from Africa as well. At the close of his proposal, he added that because Tacitus and I performed our function as advocates with care and courage, the Senate believed that we had acted in a manner worthy of the roles allotted to us. The consuls de Senate and all the consulars, as far as Pompeius' colleague expressed agreement. Pompeius proposed that the 700,000 sesterces should be paid into the treasury, that Marcianus should suffer relegation for 5 years, and that the sentence of Marius should be confined to the punishment of extortion which he had already suffered. Both proposals attract many supporters, which perhaps more favoring this less restrictive or milder one, for even some of those who seem to have agreed with Cornutus attached themselves to Pompeius, who had made his proposal following the decision. But when the division took place, those who had taken their stand by the consuls' chairs began to support Cornutus' proposal. Then those who were allowing themselves to be counted with collegial cost to the other side, and Collega was left with few supporters. He subsequently complained at length about those who had urged him on, and notably Regulus, who had felt him high and high maintaining the proposal which Regulus himself had formulated. Regulus' thinking is, in general, so inconsistent that he is both extremely forward and extremely circumspect. Such was the end of a most august trial, but one process of some importance is left hanging. Hostilius Firmius, Hostilius Firminus, a staff officer of Marius Priscus, has been involved in this case, and was heavily and severely embarrassed, for it was both from the accountant books of Marcianus and from a speech which Firminus himself made in the Council of Leipzig, that he had lent his assistance to Priscus in a most despicable commission, that he had by bargaining extracted from Marcianus 50,000 denarii, and had moreover received 10,000 sesterces in the more disgusting role of perfumer, a role not incompatible with the lifestyle of a man who is always spurs and close shaven. On the proposal of Conotus, it was agreed that his case would be raised at the next meeting of the Senate, for chance of guilt had on this occasion kept him away. You have the news from the city. Now write back with your views from the country. How are your fruit trees, your vines, your crops, and those very frisky